Hi everyone. Today I'd like to speak about the G major Sarabande and how I make decisions before I get on stage. Conscious decisions about not only slurs, dynamics, ornamentations, but how long I want to keep certain notes, which notes I emphasize, and such decisions. When I recorded the suites a couple of years ago, I realized how many decisions are involved when you perform, and how many I really didn't decide before, and they just happen. Spontaneity is great, but you have to be educated and understand what are your choices so that you can be spontaneous between choosing perhaps to bring out a certain note at one repeat and a different one in the second repeat. So sarabandes, as you may know already, have a second beat that's heavy. So the first beat is always heavy, but in a sarabande the second beat is heavy as well. And I choose to start my this sarabande on the up bow. And this helps me bring out the second beat. Because a down bow is naturally heavier. There are three voices, not one, not two, but three here. Let's look at them. So the first one, G. G that comes back in the second bar. The middle voice is this D. Top in green is the top voice. And you can think about it slightly differently. You can include that F sharp in the top voice. The two voices converge. The middle and the top voice converge in the F sharp. And so you can perhaps try and bring out the middle voice in the first repeat. So if you could hear it, the red voice was a little more prominent, and now I'll bring the top voice. So those are two options for you to choose from. A decision we have to make right in the beginning is whether the last eighth note of the first bar is part of the first bar, or is it an upbeat to the second bar. So or do you want to connect the second and third beats a little more? So as you saw this last time where I played the C and the B were more connected. This is something you probably want to think about. See if you can keep the B in bar 5 in your inner ear while you play until you reach the C sharp. We'll start in bar 5. So going to C sharp. At the same time, the A, in green, going to B, and then C sharp and D. So we have A, and C sharp and D in green. So two lines. And of course you have the middle voice that is filling this the middle voice. See if you can practice each voice separately and then put them together. That will make for a more clear picture. There are 3 hemiolas in this movement. The first one starting in bar 7. 7. Yes. So we're taking those two bars, bar 7 and 8, and making them into 3 smaller bars of 2 beats each. And if you look, I highlighted the supposed beginning of each of those smaller bars. So don't forget though to still give a little oomph to the downbeat of measure 8. This is what creates that polyrhythm that makes for the beautiful complexity in Bach's works. So in other words, sit a little bit on the red notes, but also sit on the downbeat of bar 8. I will play this one more time. Hope you didn't get confused. There is another hemiola only a couple of bars later in bars 11 and 12. We have so again, D sharp, F sharp, and E. And finally, there is another hemiola at the end of the movement in bars 15 and 16. Another example of a note that resolves quite a bit later, and it's a good idea to keep that note in your ear, to keep that tension going, and realize when the resolution happens. And I'm talking about, for example, bar 11, we have a D sharp on the downbeat. So this D sharp finally coming to rest on E. One thing I like to talk about is the pillars of support, the first and second heavy beats in a bar. Not always falling on the first and second, but mostly in the Sarabande, in fact, on each and every bar, except the hemiola bars. I like to think of the other notes, of some of the other notes, as moving forward a little bit more. After bar 12, when we arrive at E major, time. We have a new beginning. Here, the D going to the E, highlighted in red. Another example of less important notes, more passing notes. You're here. So the E and F obviously are not heavy. But even here, in my opinion, the notes in green are not as heavy as the ones in red. Notice the up motion, and then A, B, C going up, D, C, B going down, and you can help that gesture. So this C is less, in my opinion, than a D. When we get to the D, in measure 15, you can decide to sustain it while you play the second voice. Or you can play a little less sustained. There's 2 ways of playing. One would be to keep coming back to that D. There is a famous etude by Duport. Some of you may know it. can think of this bar 15 as always coming back. More separation between the B, the C, and the A on the bottom. A quick note about ornaments. Looking at bar 11, it is not clear if that little TR trill falls on the B or on the A in that measure. So we have or whatever you decide. If you do a trill on the A, I would encourage you to do just one oscillation since it's a very short note. It's a 16th note. And even if you do trill on the B, you can think of how many trills, how many oscillations you want to have. If you want to repeat the C, in other words, do you start the trill from above or not? Because we already have the C here. That rule, what we call the rule, does not always apply, and you can see where music calls for starting trills from above, from the higher note, and when you want to start the trill on the principal note, which is the B in this case. A note about slurs: you don't always want to play your heavy beats, as I mentioned before, on a down bow. One example would be in bar 9, where there is no slur on the 16th notes. So this could make for a very expressive chord. Yes, it's harder to play on the up bow, a 4-note chord for sure, but it is also can create a lot of tension, which we don't have if we play on the down bow, because it's possible. Everything is possible. Naturally, a sound will decay towards the tip of the bow. So if you start up bow, you have a better chance of sustaining the sound. So you can work with your vibrato to make that note blossom. You can also think about if you want a diminuendo towards a bar 10 or not. Perhaps for the first repeat, yes. For the second repeat, no. This will be obviously going into bar 10. And now I will show you how to diminuendo into bar 10. So both equally beautiful, and just an idea to try at home. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.